Warning: this video contains brutally honest, real talk based on the truth and may convict you, convert you, and perhaps even offend you. Viewer discretion is advised. Shalom again, Kingdom family. I am Joanna and I'm here to speak to you once more about another critical topic that we need to understand and unlearn. Thank you for joining me today, and as we jump into today's lesson, I'll do a review of the previous lesson. So let's do a recap. The previous lesson was titled The Christian Religion, and in that I showed you all and explained what it really means to be a Christian. And it simply means to be a follower of Christ, a follower of the Messiah, right? I also showed you what is Christianity. Now, based on the context, the Bible tells us that to be a Christian is to be a Christ follower. However, Christianity itself became a religion. And nowhere, absolutely nowhere in the Bible, not from the table of contents all the way to the maps, tells us that God established a religion, right? Now, religion, as I've shown you all, started through man's agenda, and it also teaches the doctrines and traditions of men. So as true followers of Messiah, once again, we also need to pattern his life, just as we were told in John, follow him, right? So, and following him, this is the true essence of what it means to be a disciple. To be a disciple means to follow your teacher, to learn from them, to pattern the things they did. So this is what I just wanted to remind us of based on the previous lesson. And as we jump into today's lesson, it's titled The Church. So I spoke about the Christianity or Christians. Now let's speak about the church. I want to also remind you that the weekly lesson is titled Hidden in History. And one of the key things I want to remind us of is this. And if you want to know the truth about something, go back to the origin of that thing, or the closest possible point to its origin. And because of the title for this week's lesson, Hidden in History, I'm now helping us go back to points in time where we need to see where things happened, when it started, and why, so that we can understand our faith today. Alright, so I'm going to continue by saying, my dear brothers and sisters, I encourage you, even though these topics and these lessons may sometimes be a bit challenging for some of us to receive, some of you already know, but yet still you're comfortable with where you are, knowing fully well it's not correct. I just want to encourage you, be willing to make the change and stand on what is true and righteous, because this is your salvation we're dealing with. This is my salvation we're dealing with, and we want to build our salvation, build our faith based on that which is true. So once more, I encourage you, and I just want to express this more and more, that I'm doing this not to point fingers at anyone, not to hit anyone with a brick in their head. It's simply to help us unlearn certain lies. In fact, unlearn the lies as much as possible, because I'm only bringing a few, there's many, and I'm only scratching the surface of some of the information to help you in your journey of truth, and to point you in the direction that you also need to go in to search out these matters and make an informed decision concerning your salvation. As I continue, I'll read, what do you think brought about the beginning of the Christian church, the social organization which unites Christians today? Well, the answer depends on the definition of the word church. Some Christians are of the opinion that Peter founded the church. Others may think that the church was established as the Jerusalem church, created by the disciples after the death of Jesus. But let us understand what the definition of church is. So I'm reading two definitions here, because generally most of us have a perception of what the church is, even though some of us know the true meaning and definition of it, but I'm going to help us understand it. So the first definition I'll give us is from the Oxford Dictionary, and it simply means a building used for public Christian worship. And this is the definition that a lot of people believe today. That's why they say, I'm going to church. Come to church. You know, we've been conditioned, and the reason why I'm using this definition, because this is a standardized worldview of what the church is. It's a building you go to, you fellowship, you join with people there. But actually, this definition of church is not what the scripture tells us. So let's go to the scripture and see what the definition of the church really is. And we see in the Greek, now the Bible was translated from Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. So one of the reasons why I continue using a concordance is to help us understand what the Greek word was or the Hebrew word was, so that when we translate it, we can come up with the exact or closest possible definition, right? So based on the Greek word, the word for church in Greek is ecclesia, right? And this word actually simply means the called out or to call out, right? It also can mean assembly or gathering. So many of us know that the word ecclesia means the called out ones. So it doesn't mean a building. It means those who were called out. And we're going to get more into this, right? Because we are called out of something. So if the church means the called out ones, or those followers of the Messiah who assembled and gathered, then how did the church, as an organization that we know it as today, become an authoritative institution that is not even based on the true foundational teachings of the Messiah himself? Now, I know this may be a bit challenging for some of us, but I'm going to seriously break this down, because not everything we hear and see in the Christian world or the church world today is accurate based on the scripture. Some of it is, some of it isn't. So, I'm going to read from, because I just asked a question, which I will read over, but I'm going to read from a particular blog by Professor Paul Flesher, and this was taken from his article, which is titled How Constantine Created the Christian Church. Alright, now he's a professor of the University of Wyoming Religious Studies Department. So I'm going to his reference point because in my research I found out that he summarized everything pretty well. So I'm just going to read what his research concluded to help us understand. But before, let me once more read the question. If the church, the word church, based on the scripture, means the called out ones or those followers of Messiah who assemble and gather together, then how is it that the church, the organization that we know it as today, became an authoritative institution that is not even based on the true foundational teachings of the Messiah himself? Alright, so as I read, it says, if the early church is defined as the first body of Christian leaders who could determine the Christian belief and establish with sound authority their definition of Christianity across the Mediterranean world, then the single man most responsible for that achievement was Constantine I, the Emperor of Rome. Although the creation and organization of the church was clearly a process that took over several decades, the founding event was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. If Jesus died sometime around 30 AD, why did it take nearly 3 centuries to found the organized church? There are 3 main reasons. First, travel and communication were difficult at that time. Secondly, there was little agreement about Christianity's belief and teachings, the nature of Jesus and God. what writings were sacred or even how to worship. Thirdly, imperial persecutions of Christians happened every few decades. These drove Christianity underground and caused many Christians to turn away. But almost worst were the rifts that happened afterwards between Christians who kept their faith and those who apostatized to save their lives, both of whom still considered themselves Christians. I want us to note this point carefully, right? As I continue, it reads, Constantine appeared on the scene in the midst of the so-called Great Persecution, begun in 303 under Emperor Diocletian. By 305, the problems caused by the persecutions were overtaken by those of determining Diocletian's successor. Constantine stood out because he became a Christian of unabashedly made Let me read that over. Constantine stood out because he became a Christian and unabashedly made Jesus the patron of his army. By 313, just two contenders remained, Constantine and Licinius. The two jointly issued the Edict of Milan, which made Christianity a legal religion and officially ended the persecution. But it was not until 324 that Constantine finally became the ruler of the Roman Empire. Constantine saw Christianity's belief in one God as a way to unite the empire that had been so badly divided for decades. But he discovered that Christianity itself was not unified, so he called the Council of Nicaea in 325 to bring together the 1800 bishops from around the empire to work out official doctrine and provide the basis for the unified church. Constantine paid for the entire council and even paid for travel, giving bishops the right of free transportation on the imperial postal system. The council laid the foundation of Orthodox theology, which is also Catholic theology, and declared several differing theologies heresies. Constantine's support initially gave Orthodox the ability to require Christians to adopt their doctrinal formula. While during the next few decades the church fortunes waxed and waned, within a century, Christianity had been declared the official religion of the Roman Empire, and non-Christian religions were in steep decline. And that ends this particular research that I just read, right? So based on what I read, and I tried to emphasize key points whilst reading, I want us to understand that in summary, this Christian religion was established by a Roman emperor for another agenda. Now, I want us to also remember, my dear brothers and sisters, the word Christianity simply means to be a follower of Messiah. Based on what we saw that took place in history, men came about with it as a religious organization for their benefit and created doctrines to fit into their agenda to help men follow them. As I conclude, I would like to read from Revelation chapter 18, verse 1 to 5. And it says, and I'm reading from the King James Version, and verse 1 says, And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. I really need to pause here. This is strong. And it is also something we need to understand and consider. So let me break down a few things from this particular passage of scripture. Firstly, what is the word Babylon in this context in verse 2? So the word Babylon can be seen in the Strong's Concordance as G897, and one of the definitions of it allegorically is that it is of Rome as the most corrupt seat of idolatry and the enemy of Christianity. Now remember, to be a Christian means to be a Christ follower. So I'll read that again, replacing the word Christianity with Christ follower. So allegorically, the word Babylon there in this context speaks of Rome as the most corrupt seat of idolatry and the enemy of the followers of Messiah. Now let's also look at the word iniquity, because we see in verse 5, her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So the word iniquity comes from the word adakima or adakaima, if I'm pronouncing it correct. Don't bash me if I'm not. Alright, and it simply means, when I connected it, it simply means a wrong done, evil doing, iniquity, matters of wrong. Now, where else do we see this word iniquity being used? We see this word iniquity being used as well in Matthew chapter 7 verse 23, and it says, And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. So as we saw, iniquity means a wrong done, evil doing, matter of wrong. But the word iniquity is also connected to the word sin. And we see in the definition for the word sin in Strong's G458, which also means anomia. And this is the Greek word, anomia. And it speaks of illegality, violation of law, or wickedness, iniquity, transgression of the law, or unrighteousness. That is also connected to the Hebrew word, I can't pronounce this one too well, but I'm going to try, avon, right? And it speaks of perversity, evil, iniquity, mischief, or sin. My dear brothers and sisters, as I conclude today's lesson, I want us to understand where everything came from, where it is now, and what we need to do. Because like I've shared in times past, we've been hoodwinked. We weren't there at that time and in that era, but everything that took place then has impacted us greatly now, to the extent where many of us are believing in something that was created for man's agenda, political power, and everything else. And the doctrines which came out of it was nothing to do with the original point of what it meant to be a Christian or Christ follower. So, I would like to read once more, and this time I'm going to read Revelation 18:4. And I'm going to say, my dear brothers and sisters, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins. I'll just read that portion. We are reminded by the scriptures to come out of her. And as we remember, the word ecclesia also means to come out. We are called out. I don't know how else to say this, but may this lesson edify us, enlighten us, and help us to truly be the called out ones. Thank you for watching. Shalom.